driver, they're not thinking about a long-term relationship with somebody in their cab. They're thinking of the one-time relationship. All classical theory is built upon the idea of a company and a company building a long-term relationship with a customer. Go back and read Adam Smith's Wealth of All Nations, and you'll find that he was talking about companies, not individual driver behavior as it pertains to cabs. But I don't want to use my time for that, James. I would like to say that even though I have had 35, 40 years at this, I have never figured out the riddle of why a cab driver would literally pay the same lease fee as somebody, say you're leasing a car from a full-service cab company, and I'll define that in a minute. Why he or she would do that, it's got to be cross-culture, out of either culture, and then drive that cab to the airport and wait for 2 or 3 hours. It doesn't make any sense. A similar driver making the same lease will take that same opportunity, go out and work his radio, go his personals, go other things, maybe do 20, 25 trips a day. Same time period, making a lot of money. Whenever we do these studies for cities and we array out the different number of trips and incomes of the drivers, you'll find a whole group of people that seemingly run to the airport and can't make a living. They're the same airport, they're the same people, by the way, that band together and say, we need to have a greater fare from the airport because we can't make a living. If you walked into a store and you want to buy a loaf of bread, it's $2, and they say, no, we got to charge you $10 for it because my clerk had sat there for 4 hours and hadn't made a sale yet, you'd never go back to that store at all. But yet we force the poor airline passenger into that situation with a minimum fare, even though they may only want to go 1 or 2 miles. That is inefficiency. That's poor regulation. But let me get to my 4 points. I apologize for that. I just have a terrible problem with cities that do that. I would say that of the 4 things that I think we have to realize as regulators, and perhaps the things for research, are things like coming to grips with the independent contractor. How do we manage with that as a regulator in our industries? Literally, how can we do that? The second thing would be that all cab companies are not the same. Stop treating them as the same. They are not. All dispatch companies are not the same. They shouldn't be treated the same way. The third thing, and I'll try to blend this together, is that from our work we have determined that, or I should say I have determined, that regulators all too often are fighting fires. They're not really going from a developed strategy. What is your strategy? Is it managed competition, limited entry? What is it? Build your program around the strategy, have the data that's there for it, and then manage with it. The last point I'm going to try to wrap it around is technology. Technology is here, is having a profound effect on operators, and it should have a profound effect on regulators because you can use that technology and data to really get your point across and manage with data instead of opinion. Let me try to blend those together, if you will. The independent contractor is literally here to stay. The more laws we pass in the United States and in Canada to protect employees, the more independent contractors we're going to have. It just is the way we are set up to do business. It is here with us. The nature of the job of a taxi cab driver is not 8 hours of continuous work like we have in a factory. It is work that has different peaks and valleys, and a good driver would typically maybe working 14, 16 hours a day. They're not working that 14, 16 hours a day unless you're playing chess at the airport and they call that work. Literally, they are running errands in some cases, picking their kids up from school. They are literally at a job 16 hours, but doing a lot of personal things in between. That is how many of them make the kind of income that they want to make, maybe on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And most drivers, if they make that $150, $200 for the day, or even $100 in some markets, they go home. If it takes them 16 hours, they're going to be there. It takes them 8 hours, they do that. It takes them 6 hours. Hey, it's a good day, they're going to do something else. That's the behavior of the independent contractor driver. You as a regulator are going to have to say, it's there, I want it to do certain things, and you're going to have to put in your ordinance that an independent contractor driver has to accept a computer-oriented mandated call the same as they would accept a hail. That's the only way to manage it, because both in Canada and the US, you literally, if you try to manage that driver as a company, that becomes an employee to you, and it's an entirely different market situation. You have to help your companies out in managing the independent contractor. They've signed up to be a cab driver. They've got their on-duty sign on. No, it's not their option to say who they're going to serve and who they're not going to serve. That doesn't mean they're an independent contractor. The best way to clean up the industry, if you have to in your community, is to be rather harsh and direct and get rid of the bad apples. Okay? Let me try to blend the independent contractor with the fact that the best way to do that is through full-service cab companies. All cab companies aren't the same. Our reports, by the way, have pictures in them. And I put them in there for the simple reason I want the city council for the first time to ever know what their cab company looks like. Is it Danny DeVito's reincarnation out there? Yes, you have those. But you also have some of the best well-managed cab companies and professional businesses out there, and they need to have their message out to the general public. They need to be able to be shown as what they are: investors, good managers, and developing a good system. Those are the kinds of people that are going to do most of your call business. They are the ones that are going to put the money to do the vouchers, to do the school trips, to do the other RFPs, to get business for their drivers. That's how they make their money. That's how they make their lease rate, by convincing a driver that they have a business opportunity here, by putting up a chart that says how many trips you can make if you work your radio, by showing that there's usually a group of folks that turn over very much at the low level. Folks in the middle, they make a decent living, but they go home, that's all they want to make. And there's some guys at the top of that list that are clearing $65,000, $70,000, $75,000 a year because they are really working that lease, and they're working very hard. And you can't really manage as a regulator unless you have that data to show your city council that no, those folks aren't driving in poverty, as the Legal Aid Society just wrote a report on. They're driving in poverty because they choose to, in a lot of cases, not always. We have run studies and analysis that show they are required to belong to a dispatch company. The dispatch company generates less than 1 trip per day for them. They can't make a living with that kind of a system. But you need the data to be able to show that. You need the data to develop your strategy. And your strategy should be built around, and I'm going to run out of time here. James, have I got the 2-minute mark here yet? Okay. You're going to build your strategy on technology. We have the technology out there today. It's no longer emerging technology to know what every dispatch company is doing per cab, per trip, per day, per driver. We know what every company is doing. We can know what every individual driver, as I said, is doing. We have automatic payment systems. We now have to basically give every driver a 1099, which is a form saying how much money you got from your credit cards. The industry is going to be able to be watched very closely. How it survives, literally, is how you regulate it. Use that data with your city council, use that data with your own group in attempting to develop a system that gives you a win-win, that gives drivers the opportunity, not the guarantee, of being able to make a good living, that attracts capital and good management to develop full-service cab companies, and also literally is one in which you reward the companies and the drivers that do the work. Get rid of, I shouldn't say it this way and I'll probably make a lot of people angry, get rid of formulas that reward everyone at the same time. Because you've got really terrible cab companies and dispatches out there doing no job whatsoever, adding no value to that permit, yet when you have a 10% increase in permits, they get the 10% like anybody else. You get somebody else that's a full-service cab company, they're managing well, they're adding value, they're adding volume to their trip markets, reward them, and reward them differentially. You serve your industry, you serve your drivers, you serve your customers well. But also have high standards, and I'll end on that point. We literally have to have standards by geographic area so that everybody knows what the market is, what their goals and objectives are, and as I said, we use those standards from the data to build our strategy from. So hopefully I've been at least modestly controversial, and we have some topics to talk about. James, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. It's a pleasure now to introduce Dr. David King of Columbia University. David, straight over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to speak to you. This is a different type of audience than I generally speak to. I generally talk to other academics who are thinking about these things, but hopefully I can highlight some of the ways that we in the transportation research academic world are thinking about taxis, which is not very much, but to talk about potential directions, I'm going to use some of the evidence and analysis of a paper that Jonathan Peters and Matt Dawson and I are working on. And we're looking at taxis as a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to extend the transit networks. And it's something that is concerning once we start looking at how taxis are treated or largely ignored within the literature. We start with the idea that taxis and transit are natural complements. And the idea that they're complementary is not uncontroversial. In many cases, you'll hear arguments that taxis are substitutes for transit, and that's not the case. Taxi service has unique characteristics that really allow people to take advantage of a transit-oriented city. If we're thinking about substantial mode choice toward transit, toward more sustainable forms of transportation and away from solo-occupied vehicles and solo driving, we have to think about how do we supply high-quality point-to-point service. Now, transit works very well for certain trips, but it works poorly for other trips, such as if you're going to go shopping, you're going to go grocery shopping, you're going to go to Target, you have to get to daycare, or a number of other factors, and people need the high-quality door-to-door service. So taxis, jitneys, and paratransit, they extend the transit network. It acts largely as a complement to existing transit. It can be equity enhancing, and this is a critical piece, is that by having a robust taxi network, you can actually improve the social equity aspects of the transportation system. Even though taxis are going to be more expensive than conventional transit, the value of the trip that people will make in a taxi will exceed the amount that they pay in the fare. Consider taxis in the context of car sharing. And this is something I'd actually like to challenge all you to think about. Car sharing, such as Zipcar, has become very, very popular with North American cities around the world, as being a sustainable, green, equity-enhancing new mode that can help reduce auto ownership. But taxis are a better alternative. They can be cheaper. In my own work that I don't have the tables from, but my own work comparing car sharing trips with taxi trips within New York City, taxi trips will turn out to be substantially cheaper. And taxi trips don't require that you supply ample low-cost parking, where you're only paying for the marginal cost. So you're only paying for the portion of the trip that you need. You don't have to supply additional parking. You don't have to supply dedicated parking spaces, so on and so forth. If you consider that a car share company will charge $10, $11 per car or per hour. A round trip to Target or a round trip to the grocery store is going to take 2 hours, so you're in $20, $22 for that car share trip. If you take the bus or you walk or take some other route to the store and then you take a taxi back, you're going to save $10, $14, $15 on that trip. That's substantial savings. And I think that